137 million Americans have faced financial hardship this year due to medical costs. People across the country struggle with these often unexpected expenses. But could you be arrested for failing to pay a medical bill? We're getting to the bottom of it in our series, Money versus Medicine. Have a look. Medical bills can be unexpected and extremely high. In some places across the country, patients who are unable to pay these bills can be sued by their local hospital, physicians, or ambulance services for medical debt. If they fail to appear in court for a debtor's exam, the debt collector can ask the judge to issue a warrant for the person's arrest. They can then be arrested and jailed. Many claim that they did not receive the summons, can't afford to miss work, and some are even too sick to attend. If a debtor is jailed and posts bail, the collector can allegedly get part of the bail money. Are these arrests necessary to keep the system working, or is it a roundabout way to punish people that can't afford their medical bills? Joining us to discuss is creditors' rights attorney Randall Lindley, also attorney and expert in consumer protection law Peter Holland, both joining us via Skype. And Randall, I'll start with you as we dig deep into this, because I'll openly acknowledge that we have been trying to dig through this, figure out how it's possible in our system that someone can ultimately be arrested and potentially even go to jail for not paying a medical bill. How does that happen?
Well, to start off with, the law does not allow someone to be arrested for failing to pay a debt. There simply is not a debtor's prison. People are not put in jail for failing to pay a debt. What they do is they get put in jail for failing to disobey a court order. Whether it's a medical debt or it's some other type of debt, the creditor files a lawsuit to enforce the obligation to pay. And the failure of that person to pay that debt results in a judgment. So the judgment is rendered against the debtor, and once a judgment exists against that debtor, then the court will be asked by the creditor to enforce that judgment. Well, the first most logical step for the creditor is to ask for the debtor to come to court or come to the creditor's attorney's office and produce documents to explain how they're going to pay for the debt. So it's called a debtor's examination, and they examine the assets that the debtor has and the ability of the debtor to pay the debt. So through that process, the court will order them to appear. And it's at that point in time when they don't appear that the court will issue this writ of attachment to have them arrested and brought before the court. But they're not being put in jail for failing to pay a debt. They're disobeying a court's order. That is the trigger for the arresting and the incarceration.
I mean, Randall, you're right on. Debtors' prisons were abolished in 1833 in this country, but to me it sounds like this is just a loophole, an end run, that you're still being arrested and put in jail. Okay, the paperwork, there was a process, but if for some reason that didn't happen, they didn't get the paperwork, they didn't get the notice to appear, and they end up in jail. I mean, I find this hard to believe.
But whether it's a medical debt or any other type of debt, that's not what happens. What happens is the court goes above and beyond in all the cases that I've been involved with to make sure that debtors receive notice of these requirements, meaning they receive notice of the order to appear.
And I want to interject because, Peter, you've had a bit of a different experience with this loophole where people are indirectly arrested, if you will, for failing to pay a medical debt. And so I would love for you to respond in terms of some of your experiences.
What's happening around this country is there are people, it's called sewer service, where they didn't get any notice, let alone, not even the lawsuit, let alone of some arrest warrant. In fact, there was a case in New York, 190,000 judgments were vacated based on sewer service. And sewer service means that somebody swore under oath that they served lawsuit papers on somebody. They filed an affidavit with the court saying that. That's known as the process server. But in fact, that didn't happen. And it's a ubiquitous problem across the country.